Hello again. It's been a while, I think. I mean, it's been, what, 3 months? 3 months? Actually been nearly 3 months since I last posted the video, which wasn't meant to be that way. But that's how it ended up, but I'm back again, and there's lots of things I want to talk about, I think in general with games and things, but I can't help myself. I'm going to be talking about Destiny 2 today, again, which seems to be, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I've played a lot of Destiny. I typically comment on a lot of the news and a lot of the changes and things like that. And something recently has made me sort of, obviously we've had Witch Queen and Season of the Risen, and we've kind of got to the end of that story arc, and that's stuff I want to talk about at some point because it's really good. But one of the key features of Witch Queen, and sort of I guess Season 16 as a whole, was weapon crafting, which I was skeptical on when it was announced. I was kind of already on the... I was sort of cautiously optimistic about it because it's such a drastic change for kind of the loot system of Destiny. Like, you're basically saying you no longer have to grind for weapons entirely. You can kind of just, like, make your own, but of course it's not exactly as easy as that. It's not just, go and customize what you want. But a big top, I mean, obviously this video is probably more relevant to people that have played Destiny and understand the system. But Bungie have recently, like a lot of people have been complaining recently about the currency caps. Essentially, there's a set of 5 different currencies which you use for specific perks that are capped about 250, and it costs about 70 of that to buy a enhanced perk, which is basically it's a better version of an existing perk, pretty much. And it's a pretty steep cost, and you also have something called Ascendant Alloy, which is another resource that has kind of been as part of the system, on top of like a hefty amount of neutral element. And obviously a lot of people have had problems with the fact that that currency is capped at 250, and people have been stockpiling deep sight resonance weapons in their vaults and all that. So Bungie have basically said that they're increasing the cap next Tuesday from 250 to 1000, and neutral elements going from 8.5k to 10k. That's pretty good, and I thought that was the change I sort of expected. But they've also said that next season that they're removing those legendary currencies, those currencies that they're upping from 250 to 1000. Next season they're going, and they kind of give a few reasons for it. They sort of, it seems like crafting as a whole wasn't really the state that they wanted to launch it in, and it seems like they did have some relatively last minute changes. They mention in the blog post, I mean, they quote say, "We initially had a currency per trait perk, e.g. to craft with Rampage, you needed a weapon with Rampage. However, due to technical and usability issues, too many currencies to track, for example, we opted to heavily simplify the element currencies to the handful we shipped at launch." And they go on to say that that caused a decrease in the interest for chasing a specific perk on a weapon for the particular element. Now, this is the part that I'm kind of getting confused about, because they start talking about the fact that they originally wanted people to be chasing specific weapons with specific perks, but of course that, as I just mentioned, the issues that caused. And so they reduced them to adroit, ruinous, mutable, energetic, and drowned elements. Drowned being from the raid. And so, but something the game doesn't, I'm pretty sure the game doesn't tell you. On Bungie's, one of their help pages, they mentioned that each of those elements actually correspond to a perk type. So if a perk's relevant to, or if it's a reload perk, something like, Feeding Frenzy or whatever, that would have I don't know the elements, that's the thing, I don't know the connection of the elements, I can't remember, but, yeah, that would have its own element, and then you would have, like, anything damage-based perks, or if it's to do with, like, I don't know, obviously, I'll link the page in the description, so you can check them all out, but essentially each, they would, instead of having an element, a currency per perk, they would have a element per group kind of thing. And so the whole system of the deep sight resonance, that obviously continued in that state, and that's something that's sort of remained in the game. And of course that seems to be the core way that they're keeping that, but of course with this change it's going to reduce the cost, and it's going to reduce part of the grind, and I think I'm a little bit confused about what this is, so we'll get into more of what they say. So essentially, and I will say, I hope my sort of interpretations and understanding are correct, because I'm unsure on, like, I sort of understand the reasoning, but I also don't, because I feel like I don't want to say they contradict themselves, it just sort of feels like they want this system to be more complex, and they wanted it to be a little bit more, so you had to put in a bit more work, but they're kind of walking that back a little bit, and it's weird because even though the process doesn't change, this is the weird thing with it, is that the process of completing deep sight resonance weapons and getting the elements from them, that's not changing, and I assume the currency you get from it is not changing. They're just taking away the legendary kind of elements from that and from the crafting requirements. So again, it's so weird because to me, it's one of those things that's more of a, it wasn't really doing much anyway. The legendary elements were only, the only thing they were doing were corresponding to a perk group essentially. But obviously their original plan I kind of liked. I like the idea of, maybe having to chase a specific weapon, but I completely understand that part. Of course it'd be insane, especially to maintain that with every single new perk that releases that feels like that would get difficult to maintain, and you've got to think about the way that they've got to convey all of the UI work that would have to be done to show that would be a lot, and it would get confusing to kind of to keep track of that. So their original plan, I think I can understand why that didn't pan out the way that, they I guess envisioned it. And I think as well that would probably make it potentially too easy, because if you get a weapon with Rampage and you can just go and put it on any weapon, and I think, well, I think there's an element of that yeah, I think it maybe does need a little bit more grind to that, sort of overall. But they do say that because of the kind of grouping those currencies, like the specific currencies, they say, quote, this unfortunately resulted in a decreased interest in chasing a specific trait perk element, which is kind of similar to what I mentioned earlier. But that's weird, because it's like, well, is that what they're still trying to do then, or are they scrapping that entire vision completely? Because to me, it sort of feels like this whole system, I don't want to say it's rushed. I don't want to make that claim, but it sort of feels like they've obviously had a design shift with this, and I just don't know if that's properly been able to take it. They've not properly been able to convey that in the system itself, because the system's still kind of built on an original vision, and I assume that, I guess, those legendary currencies going is kind of their fix for that. And obviously that's where the Ascendant Alloy, which they mentioned, is that was added later in development, and they said that sort of made the sort of condensed elements obsolete. Because obviously I assume that's Ascendant Alloys must be the thing that they're referring to as, this is the thing that's like, it's a high end material that you're going to get, and that's going to be like, you get one and then you can immediately buy a enhanced perk, and I assume that's kind of what they mean. Which I think, yeah, I think that sort of makes sense. The problem I find with Ascendant Alloys in particular is that it's kind of, it's difficult, because like they're only available from like a couple of sources. I think it's like you can get it from the gunsmith, I think near max rank, I think, or maybe it is max rank. You can get it from a master wellspring as a potential drop, and you can get it from the weekly mission as a potential drop. But it's like, by limiting it to so few places, they're creating weapon crafting, as I assume meant to be a core system of the game, but they're limiting the ways in which you can get those enhanced, those. Oh, and you can also buy it from the Cryptarch as well, I should say. But by limiting the sources of where you can get it from, that core game system suddenly becomes less of a core game system, because it's kind of not dotted around the game as much. And I also just find this whole change to me, I think I think I understand the logic behind it, but I feel like it makes the system less interesting. Again, the process doesn't change. With the deep sight resonance weapons, you're still gonna have to extract them, but it just feels like it's not interesting. I like the way crafting was, in the sense that you had like the base currency, and then you had a high-end currency, and then you had all the currencies in between, which were kind of relevant to specific perks. I think the problems here is that the names were completely ridiculous, and there was never properly an explanation about what they were referring to, and there's never a clear way that you can look at one and be like, oh, that's that perk, like, that's the one I used for that perk. And they're only used for enhanced perks. So pretty much neutral, like that's the thing, is that, again, the system's not really going to change much, because the only thing you're missing out on is the legendary elements, but they're the elements that, because of the cap, you would often find yourself you don't have any. And to me, I just can't help but feel like the changes that they're making here are kind of like a bit of a last minute kind of, I don't like a last minute, it just feels like they shouldn't make these changes just yet. The cap increase is fine. I think that's good. That's something that they're, and it's next Tuesday, which is good. That's very, quick. And to be fair, on this whole thing, it's really cool that Bungie have been quick at responding and quick at acknowledging this, and to call out these changes so soon. But I just find that these changes just feel a little bit kind of like knee-jerk reaction a little bit. I don't know. Like I know people like these changes, I think, but I just sort of think that one nice thing about weapon crafting is that it brings this kind of new vibe to the game. It's kind of like when a new expansion comes out, I think very much so with Witch Queen, the game felt like a new game. And that goes across all fronts. That's the campaign, the visuals, the locations, the amount of new places there are. Weapon crafting is part of that. The characters, especially without spoiling too much, but the ending of the story, the legendary campaign, the difficulty of it, the kind of double chests. There's so many different elements, and the mission design as well. That so many elements of Witch Queen is incredible, and so I think it is the best. Quality wise, it's the best Destiny expansion we've ever had, and it made Destiny really feel like a new game. And I don't really know if I've had that feeling, maybe since Forsaken. I think before that was kind of Taken King, and it's a really good shift. And I'm like, if they can manage to hit that every year, it's going to be impressive. But I think by taking weapon crafting and making it more simplistic and streamlined, it's not necessarily bad. It's just that I feel like it's less interesting, and I think there was something to be there's an interesting element where it was like, oh, I need this particular resource so I can craft this particular perk on the weapon, so I have to go out into the world and I've got to go and earn this. The problem is that doesn't really happen currently anyway, because you don't earn those currencies by doing a thing. You earn those currencies by having to get a weapon with a specific perk on it, and then you kind of you extract the resource corresponding to that perk group or whatever. And I think the way that sort of exists in the game is actually with raid weapons, because with raid weapons, you actually get the drowned element when you dismantle them. And I thought that was really smart, because I was kind of thinking like, oh, well, if you can craft raid weapons, it makes sense that you need several versions of them. But at the same time, eventually you're going to get there, and it's like, well, then what's the point of running the raid? And I think that's a difficult question to ask across the entire game. And I think that's kind of, I get a little bit stuck on that question myself when I think about the game, because it's like, how can you make something that keeps people wanting to play in a fair way, not like in a over the top grindy way, but in a way that kind of keeps an activity relevant for the long term? Because at the end of the day, the game's going to go on for a while. They kind of want things to have longevity. At the same time, they don't want to overdo it to the point where people play for hours and hours and hours and don't get the thing they want, and then either give up, or it's getting to the point with things like the DCV that they're going to take the content out. So they kind of, there's a lot of difficult balancing issues I think they have to get around with the game on the whole. But the raid weapons in particular, I thought, oh, it's cool. Yeah, you dismantle a weapon and you get a currency. I think they could extend that to armor, to be honest. I think, when you get screwed, like I did, I got 4 warlock chest pieces on my warlock. I got 4 of the chest pieces in 2 runs, and I was like, I don't really need 4, but thank you. And so yeah, I guess I have 1 for each element I could have, I suppose, but but yeah, I think they could extend where you dismantle an armor piece and you get some of that, the drowned element or whatever. I mean, obviously it's going out of the game, but then they have the drowned alloy and the resonant alloy, and they're like for your base crafting. But I don't know, I just kind of feel like I understand this, trying to, make things a little bit more streamlined and simplistic, but I think as a result, they're potentially risking making this system less interesting. Because it's like, well, they clearly wanted crafting to have more kind of, I don't want to say staying power, and I think like I said, the process stays the same, but I think when they start to expand things, like I said, the raid weapons needing their own element, like, I know you don't want to do that for every single weapon type because it would get too confusing, but it's like, well, you kind of want to do it enough so that there is, differentiation between, oh, well, I want to craft this weapon from this season, so I need to do this. And I think they could do it quite easily. You can have an element drop from specific enemies. You could tie some of that into planetary materials. I think rebalancing would have to be done there, to be fair, so maybe that's not the right call either. But it's like, what if you played PvP, and if it's like a PvP related perk, you could pretend you'd have to go and play PvP to get it. And I think there's a lot of things they could do, and that's why I just think that they were on the right track with these resources, but removing them completely, I think, is almost shooting themselves in the foot, and it kind of takes away from the player fantasy that I think Bungie probably want. They want people to like, oh, they want you to invest into the weapons, and I think this takes away some of that investment because it's just what two materials. It's literally the currency you're going to have tons of, and one currency that's really rare, and that's it. And all of it is you just need to play an activity, you need to hope for it to drop, and then you get it, and then you go and buy that, or you go and craft that enhanced perk on your weapon. And some will say, well, that's fine, because that's like, it's a rare drop, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't really feel like you're investing into the weapon at that point. You're using the weapon to level it up and unlock the perks. That's a little bit of investment. But you're not really doing anything with the weapon overall there. You're not going and hunting down something. Even, they called this a combat-based crafting system, and I actually thought there'd be more like challenges. I thought you would complete challenges, and that's how you'd level up your weapons. And I don't think that's a problem that there's not. But it's a shame there isn't some level of like, oh, if you go and kill Cabal enemies with this weapon, it drops elements, and then you can level up that weapon and earn the currency for that. Not the elements per. I'm kind of just spitballing. I'm just firing off random ideas, and of course, I'm not. With the unscripted nature of this, I'm not thinking it through, and maybe some of what I've said is a little bit, incorrect or whatever. But I just think that there is a lot more that Bungie could have done here, and by taking away those elements, they are sort of, lowering the quality of the system and the complexity of it, because it's just going to be, as I said, it's going to function the same, which probably, maybe this is more of a critique of how it is currently then. It's kind of like, currently it's not in the greatest spot, but I wish that they would do more with the current system, rather than just saying, oh no, that doesn't work, so we're just going to remove it entirely. Because the problem with this, I think, in the long term, and why I said that I think they might be shooting themselves in the foot, is that if they want to increase the complexity of this later, or add more of a cost to it, or more of a grind to this whole system, they can't do that unless they really overhaul it, or they add new features for weapons, or new, like a really powerful perk or something. Because if in, I don't know, 2 or 3 seasons time, they suddenly are like, oh, we're bringing back some currency, or we're adding a new currency for crafting, and this will be used when you're crafting enhanced perks, they are effectively increasing the cost of it. And if they're increasing the cost of it, then people probably aren't going to be happy, because they're like, oh, now you're just making it grindy for no reason. So, to me, I feel like they need to try and figure out more they should probably say, no, we won't remove them, but we'll try and shuffle them around a bit and make it so that they have a place. Maybe an idea I had was that have it so that each extraction gives 20 instead of 12 of those legendary materials, and if you don't want to do that grind, or you don't want to stockpile, if you dismantle it, you get +5 or +2 of both, or whatever the elements that you can extract from that weapon are. So if you have Ruinous and Adroit that can drop on it, you dismantle it and you're given 5 of 2 or 5 or whatever of each, so that it kind of or even, since resonant weapons are a rare drop anyway, give more materials or resources or whatever from dismantling those weapons, because you're players are right. I'm not keeping many in my vault. I've kind of kept a few, but that's just because I can't be bothered to complete the resonance extraction just yet. But you don't want people hoarding in their vaults, and it's how people are playing the game, really. So you kind of, why don't you incentivize people that if they don't want to, don't make it feel like a punishment for not completing it. Add something when they dismantle it, to make it feel like, oh, well, I can either get more if I do it, but at least I know if I get rid of it, I'm still making incremental goals. And sure, maybe that's not investing into crafting either, and that's not investing into weapons, but then that's when you expand the system. And as I said, I think I get that maybe they didn't want this to be super complex, but I'm like, if they make this too easy, it is going to really rival the core loot system of the game. It's honestly, it's a bit of a dangerous thing, and I assume that's why they haven't put every single weapon craftable in there. But that's part of the problem, is that now they've got crafting in there. Even who I wasn't sure on crafting, I've played the game and gone, oh, I kind of wish I could craft this. And that's partly because I want a weapon level, because I like the weapon leveling system. Other than I just wish there was more... I wish there was more flair when you upgraded the weapon. I wish it was, more of a... Think of Ratchet and Clank. Maybe not as much as that, but something to really emphasize that you just level up the weapon and unlock something new. That's just a random nitpick. But yeah, I just I mean I've rambled for enough time I think, but I just think that I hope that there is a longer term plan for this, and they are not just kind of building it as they go, and we're just going to take it away, and then later we're going to add something back, because I'm not going to complain about a system getting grindier on the gameplay side, but unless it's ridiculously grindy. But I know that that's not going to be welcome by the community, and I just think that I've actually I don't really know what many people think of this change. I've barely seen anyone talking about the particular. I've seen people talk about the caps a little bit, but not about the removing of the elements. And I just think that, as I said, the process doesn't change, but I think from a player fantasy and investment point of view, even if currently nothing is going to change really, those elements exist as an additional element or aspect, sorry, of that system that I think shows potential to have greater value in the overarching, existence of crafting, to make it feel like, where you get a weapon and you go out and you level it up, and alright, I need that material to get that perk, well I really want that perk, so let me go and do this. And you, as I said, you sort of have that with Ascendant Alloys, but it's in so few places, and I guess, they obviously want the drop rate to be low, but I'm like, that's why I don't think having only one rare resource is the right play here. I think the fact that they have the really easy to get currency, they have the kind of, slightly less, the one that's a bit rarer, and then they have the one that's really rare, and they're the kind of 3 tiers of, you need to get this, and by removing that middle tier, everyone's going to have everything they want for crafting. All they're going to need is immediately run one thing and hope they get lucky, or buy it from the Cryptarch each week. Essentially, if you just bought them from the Cryptarch each week, you'd run out of legendary shards eventually, because they cost so much. But it's going to be 1 enhanced perk a week, basically. I don't know if that's per... I assume that's per account as well. I'm not too sure about that, but I assume it's per account. But yeah, I'm going to stop rambling. As I said, I'm mixed on this, because I just think that there was a really nice vibe that Witch Queen has given the game and made it feel fresh, and I think simplifying a system where it's almost just passive, more or less, I think it's just, and it's an economy balance thing that, at the end of the day, the less they have, it's easier for them to balance. But I just think that clearly this is a system that they're going to invest in over time, and they probably have future plans for, but I kind of think it's I wouldn't call it a miss, and I think they've proven that a system like this can exist in the game, and I will say I'm really impressed with crafting, and I like what it brings to the game. But there are a lot of weird design conflicts that I think exist with it, and I just feel like the changes next season potentially make that worse a little bit. Even if the process doesn't change, the mindset and player fantasy does change, because you're less thinking about, oh, I need this resource, and you're just kind of being like, oh, let me just go get that thing, and immediately you've got it. And maybe I'm making it sound too easy. It's still going to take a bit of work, but it just doesn't. I think they could do more with those elements rather than just ditching them completely, and making it feel like, I'll say a one and done system, but yeah. Also, gold borders around the weapon would be nice when you get the level to weapon level 20, or when you upgrade the frame with the additional stat bonus or whatever. But yeah, this video's been longer than I intended. It's been obviously rambly. Again, this is what my videos are usually like. I'm curious what the people think of this. As I said, I think most people are going to like this. But I also question, I think maybe in the long run, maybe there will be questions about it. Like, it feels like it's lacking something in the end, and I do think that there's more they could do. So I'll be interested what everyone else thinks of this. If you wanna, leave your thoughts below and let me know what you think. I don't know when I'll next make a video, but I wanted to get some thoughts out there about crafting, because it's been a hot topic, and I have a lot of strong feelings on it, because I think, I was against crafting at first, because even though I thought it sounded interesting, I was like, that's a thin line to walk because of the risks it brings, and I thought they did a pretty decent job, more, give or take here and there. I think that the general concept of crafting works, but then they're taking away from it, and I just think, that's kind of where I'm now back on the fence. Almost, it's kind of like, well, I was actually enjoying some elements of it, and I liked a little bit of the complexity of it. even as I said, even if the process isn't changing, I just think that, well, the process is changing a little bit, because you're not, for example, if you were low on a particular element, you're not going to need that anymore. It's going to be any gun. You're going to be able to craft quicker than you currently are, which I think, yeah, it's going to be a little bit easier technically. By arg, you could say by about 50% of the time it would take 50% less time to be able to craft a weapon, but that's not really there's not really a definite stat. That's just a, you know, it's you could say usually you have one of two elements on your weapon, non-raid weapons anyway. But yeah, we'll see how it pans out. As I said, I just think it's going to be a bit of a shame that they're doing this. Kudos to them for making the change, or for going to make this change so quickly, and for iterating on it and being so open about what they're doing. But I don't know if I like it personally. We'll see how it plays out. As I said, let me know what you think. I will stop rambling definitely now, and I'll check out and follow me on Twitter, whatever you want to do. I'll leave relevant links in the description, and yeah, I'll see you all later, and have a good one, and ciao, 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 ciao.